I'm Jackie Bodine, and I'm the product manager on the Google Data APIs.
And I'm Ryan Boyd, and I do developer relations for Google Data APIs.
Hello, my name is Ron Hess. I'm from Salesforce.com. I'm with the platform marketing group. I'm a developer evangelist.
Great. So we're here today to talk about extending the reach of your Google Apps environment using Google's APIs. So how many people here have heard of or are familiar with the Google Apps for your domains? Nice. For those of you who don't know, this is a hosted service where you can get collaboration tools like spreadsheets and calendars, docs and email and docs. So what we're going to talk about today is using these and ways that you can extend them and make them more powerful. So I'd like to get a feel for the audience. How many people here are here because you have Google Apps for your domains in your own company and you want to build something for your own company to use? And how many people are here because you're an ISV, you want to build something and sell it to other companies? Great. And how many people is anybody here because you want to learn more about Google Apps for your domains or just learn more about the APIs? Great. Okay, so what we're going to be showing you today is a bunch of examples that show some of the powerful ways you can extend our APIs. We're going to show you some examples that will hopefully inspire you, make you think of things that you can do within your own organization or sell to other people, and just show you the breadth of things that you can do with these APIs. So what we're going to be talking today is what APIs are available. We'll show you a list of them, and we'll talk about what they can do. And then we're going to talk about what has the community built, and you'll get to see this example of things that have been done. And I'll let Ryan get started off right up here.
Thanks, Jackie. So most of what we're going to be talking about today is software, either software for websites or software that runs on your local computer. But what I wanted to show you before we start off here is a little cool device we call the radish. How many of you work in buildings that you have conference room schedules posted outside the conference rooms? Okay, so Google does this. We have several thousand conference rooms around the world in our offices. And for those conference rooms, every morning, someone goes around and puts the schedule, the daily schedule, up on the conference room doors. So you've all probably heard about the famous 20% projects that Google engineers do. This radish device was born out of that 20% project. What it is a entirely wireless calendar schedule display. So this device works on indoor solar energy, which is pretty hard to gather, and also works on a very electric, like not power consuming. This is messing up. Sorry. Low power consuming wireless device too. So what this does is it actually retrieves the calendar events for that room based off the calendar API. And all it is it uses that wireless protocol to communicate with the dongle that's on several computers per floor, and that uses a Ruby application to communicate back to the calendar API. So I just thought I'd show you that. The display actually here is only refreshed a couple times an hour. So this device is actually only on for about 4 seconds every hour, and that's how it's able to use up so little energy. Okay, so what APIs are available for Google Apps? We have separated these into the applications that you normally are using as a Google Apps user, things like calendar, contacts, spreadsheets, and your document list, and also into the administration APIs. So things like provisioning, email migration, reporting, and single sign-on. Reporting and single sign-on we're not going to talk about much today, but you can come by and stop by at our booth if you're interested in those. Reporting basically allows you to gather information on all your users, where they are with quotas and things like that. And single sign-on allows you to hook into your existing authentication infrastructure. So what are these apps APIs? Most of them are based off of the Atom Publishing Protocol. The Atom Publishing Protocol is the Atom syndication format, which you're probably familiar with from your blog readers, and also a simple HTTP-based protocol. So you use the standard HTTP methods, get, post, put, and delete. You're all probably familiar with get and post, maybe not as familiar with put and delete. Get retrieves an entry or a feed. Post allows you to insert a new element into an entry or feed. Put allows you to modify something, and delete allows you to delete something. So I mentioned that they're based off of Atom Publishing Protocol. On top of that, we have what are called Google Data APIs, based off Atom Pub as well. And they extend the Atom Publishing Protocol to implement a few things. A data model specific for different types of things, like a calendar event or a contact entry, and a batch model to allow you to submit many different requests at once. Here's a basic feed and what it looks like. So I've edited a few of the required elements out here for brevity, but basically, as you start at the top here, we have the ID of the feed, we have a published time, the author, title, and the entry data. That's all part of standard Atom feeds. We also, in the bold here, have a few elements which are added. This represents like a calendar event. So we have a few elements that are added to indicate what a calendar event looks like. So the start time and end time of the event, an event status, and things like that. So migrating and syncing data. A lot of you work, as you answered at the beginning, with Google Apps domains. Either you use it internally or you're building solutions for other Google Apps domains. Many of these people have previous systems that they used for mail and calendaring and things like that, and you want to be able to migrate your existing data over to Google Apps. Here's an example of one such application, the Google Calendar Sync app. The Google Calendar Sync app is an application which we make available to everyone on our website. And what it allows you to do is synchronize either one-way or two-way the events between Outlook and Google Calendar. So the amazing thing about this is it works based off this exact same APIs that you guys are able to use in your development. There's nothing special here. If you did a packet capture on it, you would see the same types of requests that are documented on code.google.com. And the features of the Calendar API. The Calendar API allows you to create, edit, and delete calendars. It also allows you to deal with events. So you can add a new event, manipulate an existing event, delete events, pretty much everything you have to do with calendars. The additional thing that you guys might be used to in the Google Apps world is also allows you to manage your access control lists. So you can decide who has access to which of the calendars and all through the API. Authentication. So for all these different types of requests, in particular, anytime you're doing updates or deletes or things like that, you have to authenticate. You also have to authenticate if you're going to retrieve private data. This previous example was a desktop app, so it used what's called client login authentication. This is a simple username and password. You type in the username and password into the application goes off and retrieves a token, which it then uses for all the follow-up requests. A lot of you will probably be building websites as well. And websites, we use what's called our auth-sub authentication mechanism. Auth-sub basically allows you to not worry about using the credentials yourself, but instead have Google manage those credentials. So what you do in your application is when you're ready to authenticate the user for access to their data, you redirect them over to Google's website. They fill in their username and password on the site, or if they're already logged into their Google account, they just arrive at this page here. And what that allows them to do is authorize your application to have access to their data. Here's another example of an application which uses our APIs. We call it the DocsList Uploader, a very simple application name. It's really just a sample application, although it did manage to appear on Lifehacker as a usable application. It was written by one of the people that I work with and in about a day. And all it allows you to do is drag and drop files from your local desktop into Google Documents. So things like your existing Word or PowerPoint or Excel files, you can just drag and drop them over to this little box in the center here, and they will automatically be uploaded. You can also right-click. It deals with the context menu, too. This actually deals with a lot of the functionality of the Documents List API. But here's a little example about how simple it is. 3 lines of code is all that's done to upload that document. Now, I told you it took about a day to write this application. Obviously, that day wasn't spent writing 3 lines of code, or I hope not. But the 3 lines of code here are just to set the application name, specify the username and password, and specify the location of the file to upload. This is using our .NET client library, which made this really easy. Most of that day was actually spent dealing with inter-process communication for when you right-click on a file and you already have a running instance of the DocsList Uploader to allow that new instance from the right-click to communicate with the running instance. So the actual code for dealing with our APIs was really simplistic. So the client libraries. You write the code in the language of your choice. Right now we have client libraries for .NET, Java, PHP, Python, and Objective-C. And what those client libraries allow you to do is just not worry about that raw protocol. So like I said, the raw protocol is XML and HTTP. Some people will still like to work with that. Some people like to work directly with the protocol. But others just want to be able to write those simple 3 lines of code and upload the Google documents. So we have these client libraries to allow you to more easily work with our APIs using traditional object methods that you're used to in most of your code. And we have an article on code.google.com which has more information on both that DocsList Uploader and getting started on each of our client libraries. Duplicating a little bit of content here, but the document list data API basically allows you to just upload the documents and retrieve an existing list of all your existing documents. Email Uploader. Email Uploader uses what's called the Email Migration API. Like I was mentioning with migrating and syncing data, a lot of you probably have existing stores of email that you need to upgrade or upload into your Google Apps environment. So this is just a desktop application which we built on top of the Email Migration API, which allows you to take your Outlook or Outlook Express or Thunderbird email files and upload them to Google Apps. So the Email Migration API does allow you to do just that. It allows you to put new email, existing email into your Google Apps account. We don't have the ability to retrieve out your email that's in Google Apps, but we rely on the standard protocols that people are used to for doing that. So we provide access via POP and IMAP for retrieving your email out. And I should mention that this is only available in the Premier, Partner, and Education versions. So Jackie's going to come up here and talk about powering your website with Google Data APIs.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. So what you've just seen is a bunch of examples of ways that you can take data that's in your existing systems and move them into the Google Apps systems, or migrate between them, or sync between them, so that you can keep them both at the same time. So I'm sure that all of you can think of examples of legacy systems that you know, or line of business systems you know, where you'd like to see that connection. So we showed you a few examples, but you don't only need to be able to import from Outlook, for example. You could import from whichever calendaring and emailing tools you're currently using. So now I'm going to move over and talk about websites that you might host and ways that you can use these APIs to make those websites more powerful and to make it easier to build these interactive websites. So the first website I'd like to talk about is our code.google.com website. And if you visited this website, you'll see there's this little box here that shows the latest articles that we've posted, or a few articles that we've chosen to highlight. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this, and I'll talk a little bit about the underlying structure in a bit. One way is you could use the client libraries we talked about. But over here, what you can see is instead of going in and building this all out from scratch, you can power it with a spreadsheet behind the scenes. What this lets you do is when you want to add a new article, you can just open up your spreadsheet, go in there, edit it, use formulas, sort, do all of these things. And this gives you a nice administrative interface towards the data that you're exposing on your website. I've got another nice example here. This is something we used internally for a plant sale for Earth Day. And what this does, same as before, it's being powered by a spreadsheet. But now, not only are we using the spreadsheet to render it on the page, we're actually also linking in the Google Checkout API so that you can go in, take that data from the spreadsheet, and then click that purchase button, add to cart. And using Google Checkout, you can actually build this very lightweight shopping cart. And you can see that behind the scenes here, this is also just a simple spreadsheet. It makes it really easy to manage this data. So one more example, and then I'll show you how all this magic is done. But the spreadsheet API, there's two different ways you can interact with your spreadsheet API. One is by cells, and that's the typical way you think of a spreadsheet. So you go to B3 and read that data or change it. But another way is that we find a lot of people are keeping lists of information. So you saw a list of articles or a list of plants that were for sale. And when you want to work with your data that way, you can use the list feed, and that lets you edit it by row. So that means that atomically you can insert one row, or you can pull back the data from one row and edit all the fields and send it back with the updated values. And this makes it really easy to write code that sort of loops through the rows, adds new rows, and deals with it in this nice atomic list format. So the one more example here, this is our events calendar. And so not only the Spreadsheets API, but also over here we've used the Calendar API and the Maps API to do this mashup where you can see where future developer events are, when they are, and see them on a map. So the magic that lets a lot of these sites happen is called JSON and script. So we talked earlier about the client libraries, and most of those work on the server side. So if you have a PHP server or Java server, if you're using App Engine, you have a Python server. But let's say that you don't have access to that. Let's say you're hosting something on Google Pages or on the Google Code hosting. Right there, all you have access to is HTML and JavaScript. So with the JSON and script model, this lets you take the data and client-side do the processing and the displaying. You might have heard of the single origin policy that blocks HTTP requests from one domain to another. And the JSON and script, which I'll show you in a second, gets around that so that you can actually still request data from Google and display it on your site. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and that gets you the data back in a JavaScript object, which is easy to work with. And all you do to do this is we showed you earlier about how these feeds are all Atom Publishing Protocol feeds. They have a URL that you go to get that XML document. If you take that URL you were going to enter in anyway, just add question mark, alt equals JSON and script, and give it a callback function, it will return it in this alternate format and makes it really easy to use. And you put that link right in your script tag. I'll show you an example in a second. And that's going to call your function, pass the data in, and you just work with it just like regular JavaScript. It's a nice way to get your data cross-site for most Google APIs. And the one caveat I'll give you now, because we're talking about Google apps for your domain environments, is that when you're on the public internet, you can take these files and make them open to everybody. And so it's very easy to say, take JavaScript, pull it into your site. But you can't do this authentication directly in JSON and script. We have a separate JavaScript library where you can. But when you want to use JSON and script inside your domain, one of the nice things we found is that behind your firewall, where only people from your domain can get to it, you can create a proxy, just a little server that will take the URL you're requesting, add on the authentication headers for a non-user account, fetch that, and then display it to everybody without that authentication. And that lets you use this JSON and script model, which is easy. If you're familiar with JavaScript, might be easier for you, and lets you do that even behind your firewall. So this is what that JSON and script looks like. So I've called my URL, and I've passed it to say that I want my func. And what it's done is instead of that XML format you see before, this is actually a JSON format. It's one-to-one mapping. It's the same data, but here it's in JSON, which is the native format of JavaScript. And not only is there this object you can see here with the feed and the entries, but there's also, it's wrapped in this call to my func. And so what this will do is when it's loaded on the page, it will automatically go in and call the myfunc function that you've passed in and start running your code. And this is how it gets around that cross-domain issue, because you are able to load a script from a cross-domain source. So over here is what the code might look like. You start off with that script type. You can see the source. I've got the URL to my calendar feed. I added a line break in here so it's easier to read. But I just pass in the callback function, some extra query parameters like how many results I want. And then down here you can see on the JavaScript, we've got my function, and it takes in that whole object. And let me go back for a second. You see it takes in root var feed equals root.feed. If we go back here, you can see my func, and on the fourth line is feed. So that's how we're just walking down the tree of this JavaScript function. And then you can see over here, it's just going to start looping through the entries in there and pulling out the title and the start time. So if you're familiar with JavaScript and you don't have access to a server, this is a really easy way to take the data from these Google Data APIs and pull it right onto your website and quickly make things like that CodeDuck, Google.com articles list, that plant sale website, or that maps mashup. And with that, I'm going to give it back to Ryan to talk about connecting with business systems.
So in addition to migrating data from your existing systems, you probably already have other business systems that you want to hook into. You want to keep operating those systems while you operate Google Apps. One example of that might be to provision new accounts. So if you're a business, you probably have an HR system where when someone gets hired, they add a new entry to the HR system. Or if you're a university, you have a student information system. Or you may actually have like all sorts of different systems to maintain who's actively working within your organization. Provisioning is very important then. You want each of these users to get a Google Apps account. But you don't want to have to manually create that account each time. So we have what's called the provisioning API. What that allows you to do is add users, delete users, change passwords, all sorts of things like that. And this is actually a demonstration of one of our sample applications that's included with the PHP client library. And it allows you to do just that. So you can see on there I'm creating an account for my future dog named Digit. Please don't anyone take that dog name because I really want that to be unique to my dog. But I'm creating an account, and he'll be able to get his own email. So the provisioning API allows you to deal with all these accounts and also deal with nicknames, so email aliases and lists. So we've gone through a number of examples here. Jackie talked about a lot of Ajax examples. So if you're doing JavaScript websites, you don't have a back-end server. But a lot of these different types of applications, especially like provisioning we just talked about, you want to have some sort of back-end server store for dealing with your applications. So I wanted to throw in here a slide about Google App Engine. Many of you may have seen this launched. What Google App Engine is a hosting environment for all of your web applications where Google deals with the infrastructure sides of things. We deal with the system administration. We deal with the scaling. All you have to deal with is writing your application. So how this hooks in with all these APIs is we actually have a Python client library. Right now, Google App Engine is based off of Python. And our Python client library, we've added some special extensions to that to allow it to work with our APIs. With Google App Engine. And this is just a demo application that is available on CodeDuck.com, which shows you about how to do authenticated retrieval of various feeds using that Python client library on App Engine. So one other thing is you can authenticate your users on Google App Engine as being members of your domain. So all your various users in your domain, they can visit the website, they can authenticate as them, and then you can choose to provide them access to certain data. And in addition to them being able to authorize access for your application to their own data using the auth system. So now Ron is going to come up here and talk about how Salesforce hooks into Google Apps.
Hello, thank you, Ryan. My name is Ron Hess. So Salesforce, if you're not familiar with Salesforce, it started out as a CRM company, and we've been very successful selling sales automation, marketing automation, and service automation. And recently, we've taken the same tech that Google has and built a cloud platform. We call our cloud platform Force.com. It allows you to build applications in the cloud, run them on our infrastructure. And we've tailored our Force.com platform for businesses. It provides some additional features like workflow above and beyond a traditional database in the cloud, workflow, approvals, and so on. Today, we have 1 million plus users of our applications and our platform, and Google has millions of users. So how do we combine these two? How do we make them relevant and useful for you as developers? So recently, Salesforce announced the Salesforce for Google Apps. It's an integration between your CRM in Salesforce and your Google Apps for your domain. So now you can run your entire business, CRM and productivity apps, all in the cloud. But really, what does that mean for developers, for us here today? Well, what we've done is we've actually built the basis for a client library. We have a feature called SOA, which allows server-to-server communication, and allows developers to access both of these markets. So just a quick poll here. I'd like to see how many folks actually are Salesforce customers today. Anybody? And there are a few people. Okay, wonderful. So you'll want to understand just how you can build an application on the Force.com platform and integrate it to the productivity apps that Google provides. So what we've done is we've built the basis for a client library. And I think the next slide is to introduce the demo. So I've got a demo here, and I'm going to set the stage for my demo by describing that we do use Google Apps for Your Domains internally. We track a lot of stuff at Salesforce. Specifically, for this demo, we track calendars. We track the speaking calendar for my team, and we also have an HR app built on the Force.com platform. This HR application tracks all sorts of things, but today I'm going to just point out the vacation requests. So we want to track vacation requests in Force.com, and we want to track the calendar of speaking events in Google. So let me flip over to my demo. I have to move this one down, bring this one up. There we go. This is the normal Salesforce screen, and I've got a vacation request application up here. Over here on the right, this is our pull down. This allows you to flip between applications, and I've got a vacation request. In the vacation request application, everyone has paid time offs. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up one of these PTO objects. It's not really an event, but it does represent some time on a calendar. It represents a number of days and a starting date. So up here on the right, you can see the starting date. Looks like 5/28. So this says that Jason's going to take 1 day off of sick leave starting today. And you can see down here the calendar event that represents this. Now, we store this. I created this calendar event from the platform when the event was created. And I'm going to actually edit this now. In order to edit an event in the Google Calendar API, this is the Google Data API, I need this edit link. So it's down here. So the edit link allows me to publish changes to this event, edit it, delete it, whatever I need to do with it. So I store this in my database, so now I have a link to go ahead and make that change. So what I'm going to do is, Jason's called me up and said, I'm not really sick, I'm going to take the rest of the week off. And so I'm going to change his leave type to annual leave, and I'm going to set him up for 3 days off. Now, when I do this save, we're actually going to go ahead and update the corresponding event in the calendar. So there's the save, there's the update that's happening, and we finally jump back to our event, and we can see that the leave type has changed to annual leave, and the event, the when, has changed to be 3 days off. Now, this all happened, but it didn't happen on the browser. It actually happened server to server. The browser's only sending an event to the server to tell it which record is being updated. The server itself is acting as the client talking to the Google API. And now you can go back and just look at the team calendar and see just what Jason's done. Here's his event. He's taking off the rest of the week. And that means he's not available to speak at the Rails conference. So with this overlaying of information from two different systems, I can really drive my business, and I can assign another one of my speakers to speak at the Rails conference instead of Jason, since he's going to be unavailable. So that's the demo, but let me flip back now to the slide and talk a little bit about just what's going on under the scenes, behind the scenes there. So what we've built with our server is a call-out mechanism so that our servers can actually call the Google servers. And we use the REST API, and we use the Atom Pub to send the data across to make an update request to the Google Calendar. And all that's triggered from the user's browser when they click on that Save button. So behind that button, when that's executed, we run Apex code on the server. So all it takes as an input is the record ID. It reads the number of days off, the starting date, and it sends that across the rest to Google Apps. It returns with the new edit link, the updated edit link, and then we can do a partial page refresh back to the user's browser. So this has a tremendous advantage over working data mashups inside the browser. It lets the servers do what they do best, and it provides performance and reliability. Now, I do have another slide I wanted to show you. It looks like we have just enough time to take a look at the code. Apex code is our server-side programming language. You can't see here is that it really does run on the server. What you can see here is that this code looks like Java. We did start out with Java as a framework for our language, but we've also extended Java to deal with the database. So there are some data handling routines that we don't see in this particular example. I just wanted to point out how we consume the Atom pub in Apex code. So first off, before I can publish an event, I need to get a list of events. So this is a simple code snippet showing how I'm going to go out and ask Google for the events. There's a class called user agent, which I've created earlier, and it knows some particulars, including how to authenticate with the Google data APIs. And it has a method called get, which is going to take advantage of the API, the HTTP get, as we're all familiar with. And the default feed is a global in my variable. And what I do is I pass in a start min and a start max. That gets me a range of time. And I'm going to pull that back, and I'm going to process that with a method called getEvents. And you can see here, I just construct an XML DOM from the response. That's the Atom event that's come back from Google. And then I iterate across that with the traditional DOM parsing, get elements by tag name. I get a list of entries. Now I can go across those entries and build a list and return that to the rest of my Apex code. It's very simple. I just wanted to encourage you to try Google Data APIs. It's actually easy to use. And Force.com platform offers all the tools that you'll need to integrate these two business systems. We've taken this code to do this type of demo and exposed it on code.google.com. It's an open source project. It's the start of our client library, which you'll be able to use if your customers want to talk to a Salesforce database, or if you'd like to sell to our Salesforce customers on our App Exchange. You can write apps that talk to the Google productivity suite. So thanks very much, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ryan, who has just another slide. Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to show, to close here, our solutions marketplace. So for those of you who are developing applications and want to make those applications available to other people, either for free as open source projects or for pay for you to have some income for your software development, you can go here and list your applications on this website. Same thing is if you are internal to a company and you want to have some of these migration tools or have some things that work with Salesforce and Google Apps, and you don't want to roll the ball yourself, you can go to this site and find other solutions that people have developed, or find companies that will build those solutions for you. Here's just one example of what each listing looks like. Basically, you go in and you have your company logo, you have a description of your product, links for trying or buying the product. Some people have videos and that sort of thing. And basically, it's just a great way for you guys to develop your applications and see them listed up here and allow others to come and find them. So most of the stuff we've talked about is going to be available, or is available on code.google.com if you need any information about our APIs. But before we let you all go, I would like to invite you to come up here to the microphones. There's one right here in the center, and one over here to ask any questions that you might have. Anyone? Any questions?
Yes.
Sure.
How can you integrate Google Apps with client-server applications such as SAP and get like tasks from SAP, get into your calendar, and get not have my people go to SAP, see some stuff, and go to Google Calendar and see other stuff?
Repeat the question.
So the question was how you can integrate these client-server applications like SAP into Google Apps and allow you to exchange data between the two. I guess there'd be two different sort of architectures that you could do with that. One, you could have an application, which I'm presuming that your SAP instance or whatever has some sort of APIs. You could have an application that sits there and runs and talks to SAP and then talks to Google Apps. Or I'm not sure in your particular instance whether you can actually have code running on SAP or something like that, like Salesforce does with their Apex code that automatically does that synchronization. But at the end, it's just raw HTTP and XML. Anything that you can use and you can communicate over TCP to send your HTTP requests or parse XML data, you can use these APIs with. Sure.
So the question was, today with the Salesforce Google integration, you can take an event and push it over to a Google Calendar. You'd like to do the same thing with a task that's inside Salesforce. The data structure is very similar. You'll be able to take advantage of the client library stubs that we've just built here and published, and you would write your own Apex class that publishes the task in whatever format or with whatever fields you want to a Google Calendar. So that's a very straightforward exercise. And come and see me over at the Google Data booth, and I'll show you just how to do it. We'll walk through the code and look at just how you can publish your tasks to the Google Calendars.
But we don't currently have a task-specific application. Some people do store their tasks inside Google Calendar, but no, there's not currently anything specific for tasks.
So Google has done a nice job adapting Atom publishing protocol for accessing its data. And are you doing anything to popularize that for other sorts of applications like Salesforce.com, for instance? Because there seems to be a lot of fragmentation about all the different data access APIs and abstractions people are using to get at this data that's spread across the cloud.
Sure. So your question was that Google's done a lot to promote the Atom Publishing Protocol API, and are we doing more to help other people also do the same?
Particularly as this back-end data access API abstraction.
Mm-hmm. Particularly as the back-end data API abstraction. So we do care a lot about making sure that making the web a better place. And one of the things we've done is we put an open patent license on all of the Google Data APIs. What that means is that that protocol that we've defined, the data models and things like that, are open for other people to use, so that any other site could expose their data in exactly the same format. And if you have more questions about that, you can definitely come up and talk to us about it at the booth. Any other questions?
One more up here.
My objective is to do a Google search and parse the results based on my search criteria and aggregate those results in a nice way and put it on the website. Is there any API, any tools available to do that easily?
Yeah, so your question is that you want to do Google search results, parse them, and show them in a nice way on your site. That's actually a place where the Ajax APIs that you heard about at the keynote can actually work. They have a search bar, and so you can set it up so that you'll get a nice UI that's customizable either with CSS or going into it with the API to render it in the way that you want to.
And they actually did just release a REST-based version of that, so you don't have to do it purely in Ajax. So if you check out their website, If you look on CodeDuck.com for search APIs, you'll find that information.
Yeah, I think probably I miscommunicated. For example, aggregators, they look for specific things and they post on the website. So I would like to aggregate information based on my own search criteria. The user on my website doesn't have any power to query search, but based on the category of the website, I search for some few things on the web, categorize them and put them in nicely on my web so people can read the articles on my web.
So the question is, can you do this without having the user search, but you do the actual search? And I believe the answer is yes. I believe that you can actually pre-specify that search term. Instead of having the user search, you can actually put in the search term that you would like to have show up.
Basically, once the search results come back, I would like to parse them and put them in a nice way rather than just pulling the information from the web and showing it as is. I would like to parse it and present it to the user in a nice, friendly way where he can do stuff with that information.
Okay, I think that's possible with the Ajax APIs, but I think the best thing is that to stop by the booth with the Ajax search APIs, and they should be able to pull up some code and show you a demo right there. All right? I think you were next.
Not specific. Sure that I'm familiar with that specific bug. Is Gabe in the audience still?
So the question was, are we doing anything to fix the bug with the email uploader when the Outlook is backed by Exchange?
You should look into it. As soon as you upload anything from Outlook or from an archive PSD that automatically talks and gets its email addresses from Exchange backend, it only pulls said like the last name is the email address and the first name is the only thing it gets for name. So it just is completely for any. I know a lot of people who are trying to get app migration into their company and if they're migrating from Exchange backend, it's almost impossible to do so.
Great.
So yeah, let's chat afterward. And before we have time for a couple more questions here, but before that, I wanted to mention that right after this, we're going to have a fireside chat with the Google Data APIs engineering team right next door. So if your questions don't get answered here, you can get them answered there.
I'd also like to point out that it's a good time to mention we have Google Groups for all of our data APIs. So if you do have questions like that, that's a good place. We monitor them and we answer those questions pretty frequently there. But we'll definitely look into that one. Yes? Talk.
There's a session.
Yeah.
So you're trying to authenticate your users to your Google Apps domain, and you want to control it entirely yourself, is that? So the single sign-on API, the SSO API, allows you to do that. We didn't dive into that here, but you can chat with us later. Yeah, that allows you to create your own interface on authentication.
There's a session on authentication at 4:30, I believe. Question?
All right.
Yeah, quotas. Are there quotas associated with Google Data API?
Question?
There are various quotas associated, but most of it's for the protection of the systems rather than for limiting what you can do. So if there's any point in time that you hit one of those quotas, post in the group about it, and we'll take a look at that and make sure that you're a legitimate use case.
All right, thanks everybody, and don't forget to fill out the surveys. Let us know what you liked and didn't like, and we hope to see you in the fireside chat next door or at the booths later on.